does it make sense to give the candidates the power? If somebody's not happy, then is there a smart way to equip candidates with the right level of knowledge to be able to really excel in their next career move?
A few weeks ago, I saw a LinkedIn post from a friend of mine describing her experience being interviewed by an AI. She applied to a company, they set up the first round of interviews, she showed up, and it wasn't a person on the other side. It was an AI, and she described the experience as pretty lackluster. It was very off-putting, made her for certain not want to work at this company. Listening to that got me really interested in what is happening with AI in the talent and recruitment space. Obviously, AI is changing a lot of things, but what's it doing to recruiting, since that's such a key area? How is it impacting candidates? How is it impacting hiring managers? How is it impacting companies? And so I was really excited when a good friend of mine, Tom Kelly, reached out. Tom is the co-founder of a company called Evona, which is a recruiting company focused specifically on the space industry. I've known them for several years. I've watched them expand first from the UK and Europe into the US, and now into executive search. In this conversation, we talk a little bit about the history of Evona, kind of what the current state of talent in the space industry is. You are not going to guess what one of the hottest hires is right now. But most of the conversation focuses on AI. What's working, what's not, and where are we going? It's a really interesting conversation. I think Tom has some very counterintuitive takes, so I'm sure you will enjoy it. Before we get into the conversation, I do want to remind you that if this is your first time listening to the show, please make sure you subscribe so that you never miss a future episode. And if you're listening to this and happen to be someone who is responsible for developing leaders in your organization, I would love to talk to you. Please reach out through matt@bettereverydaystudios.com so we can find out what we can do to help make your managers better. With that, let's get into the discussion with Tom Kelly. Tom, welcome to the Leadership Launchpad. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited we're going to get to chat because we first connected. We were talking before this. It was at least 2 years ago, I think. We both live in different cities now. So much has happened. So to get started, I'd love for you to take me up to speed, because I think when we first connected, it honestly wasn't that long into Evona's history as well. So what is your company and kind of how has it grown over the past couple of years?
Yeah. So some major differences in the last few years. I now live in the US along with one of the other founders. Beforehand, everybody was based in the UK, and we were primarily working with seed through Series B, potentially Series C space organizations who were looking to scale rapidly. Since then, we noticed a lot of augmentation at the executive level. So we teamed up with a chap called Steve Binder, who also is from SpaceX, who runs our executive search practice. So we now have an executive search arm of the business, and myself and Jack are here just to grow the presence. We're still indexed mainly into kind of seed through Series D. Quite a few of the companies that we work with have IPO'd, AST, Voyager, and so on and so forth. But fundamentally still in the same crazy world that is working with these space startups who need to hire as fast as possible with crazy hires. And, we love it, but it's certainly challenging. That's for sure.
Yeah, there's always such niche requirements from some of these companies. One thing that I was really interested, or that came to mind when you reached out and we started talking, was I think right now especially in the States, I don't know about globally, but especially in the States, we're hearing all kinds of stuff about talent shortages and hiring shortages of whether it's manufacturing companies or they're trying to expand and they just can't get enough workers, whether it's the skill or there's not enough people there. Within the space industry, what are some of the big bottlenecks that you're seeing from a talent perspective?
Yeah. Okay. The two major areas you could divide into engineering and sales. Those are the two hardest areas.
Interesting.
Um,
Interesting.
yeah, if we go with engineering first because it's a bit more obvious, and then we'll go into sales because that's a lot more nuanced. But engineering, it's electrical engineering, electrical power systems, um, power electronics. Those are the three core, very, very difficult areas. The reason being because certainly over the last sort of 10, 15 years, Internet of Things and that whole idea of a piece of hardware being alive, that requires a lot of electronics. And therefore, had most sectors now that are starting to develop their own hardware. That means that there's a huge pull, and lots of universities have been scrapping their electrical engineering courses because nobody wants to do it because it's not a glamorous job. I would
Interesting.
liken it to, I don't know if if you've done much in terms of like house improvements or anything like that, but plumbers, and electrical engineers, they're just a nightmare to find. It's exactly the same. It's not a glamorous job, but it's in huge demand because you need a person to actually do it. So if I were a betting man, and I would get a phone call from a news-based company tomorrow, I could bet that they would say we're looking for electrical engineers and electrical power systems, uh, sometimes GNC as well. Um, that's a huge demand. Um, Reason being, we obviously fly more satellites, we need to be able to control them to move them around.
Yeah.
But also some of the primes like Lockheed Martin are nurturing this talent, pushing them into program management. So you've got the startups where this skill set has an increased demand, but then you have the primes who are kind of squeezing talent into more of a program management route. So engineering wise, that's absolutely where the core demand is.
It's interesting, especially on the electrical side. I would have expected what you said of there's just a lot of demand, right? Like, and so there's so many different companies pulling that talent that it's getting spread thin. That totally makes sense to me. I never would have expected you to say that the kind of the sources are drying up.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Okay, so that's the engineering side.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in sales. I've heard this before, so I'd love to hear your take on it.
Yeah. So the sales side is fascinating. Um, the DoD area remains very strong. You're looking at NGA, NRO, anything more on the geospatial side, but increasingly more on the satellite side. Um, but as well, there's obviously US Space Force, Army, Navy. There's just a lot of demand in those arenas. And if you're a space startup and you want to get funded, seed investment, great if you have an amazing idea. But next, it's like, right, now we need to sell this thing. And there are very interesting companies that are cropping up that are doing well, such as Cyber Advisors, based out of Texas. Really strong at those initial contracts and looking to get the companies going. But then investors are like, okay, great, right? You have the concept from a technology perspective. Now we need to make sure that somebody wants to buy it, and it's such an ever-changing landscape because, of course, initially you're looking to win those sort of first level of contracts. That's a certain skill set. But then off the back of that, when it comes to actually manufacturing, then you need somebody who can go in and is able to articulate what the company actually are doing. And so therefore you need somebody with space experience. So it's in the early stages, it's about knowing the end customer. As you move into the manufacturing area, it's about being able to articulate what the company is actually doing at a technical level. So you kind of get this like meandering requirement
Yep.
of skill set, but
Yep.
all incredibly important. And that's why we've seen a lot of very senior business development and salespeople go fractional, and they might pick up a number of different customers and help them out. But as demand has spiked again, as I'm sure you're aware, record-breaking investment into the space industry in Q2 of
Yep.
this year. Recruitment follows investment by 6 months. So we're expecting, it's very busy now. We're expecting a tidal wave around about October, November time. And if, again, from a betting perspective, it's typically going to be engineering or it's going to be sales.
Yep.
And that demand won't go anywhere at all. The sales strategy side is also it's just a key area for businesses. And we're seeing a lot of companies pivot and want to change out the sales direction. I think it's nuanced. You have to look at the different parts of that exist in the sector. From a geospatial perspective, what Umbra did in terms of open sourcing their data, everyone's like, right, okay, what does that mean now? And because new space is still new, overall, there's all these meandering and changing situations. And that is when it comes to the sales cycle and the sales process, you have to follow them. Because ultimately, if you don't have orders, then your company will be in trouble.
Yep.
So we're seeing a lot of technical sales engineers that are needed. We're seeing a lot of TPMs that probably learn to then flip into that role. So it's a fascinating area. It changes like
Yeah. Yeah, and just to give some context for anybody who isn't familiar with it, like you mentioned SIBRs, and so these are like really early, relatively small contracts that the U.S. military is trying to push out. They're incentivizing purchasing from smaller providers because they know kind of the ecosystem of DoD suppliers has kind of atrophied over the last few decades. But even the military has an incredibly difficult time transitioning from those early contracts to those later contracts. And so those early contracts can help. It makes sense why there's different requirements for the people who are doing it, because those early contracts, it's somewhat programmatic. It's easy to get in the door. It gives kind of the VC world a little bit more of a warm fuzzy feeling that okay, there's some demand, there's some longer term demand there. But then getting that shift over into what's called a program of record, it's an entirely different thing, because now you're talking about funding streams that are often coming from like congressional law, where like that's where you need to get. And it's, having been on the inside, it isn't, I can't tell you how hard it is for the military themselves to move money around and put money towards what they want to put money towards. And so I can only imagine the skill set involved in being able to do some of those later stage things to really help the company achieve the scale that any company is going to want to achieve.
That's it.
So that makes a lot of sense. There's this demand. You're expecting this tidal wave of demand. The main thing we wanted to talk about today is there's also tremendous changes happening in the entire kind of talent acquisition realm. Largely, everything's changing as a result of AI. From my perspective, having been someone who's just known a lot of recruiters, known a lot of hiring managers, been involved in training hiring managers and things, I've always felt this was a piece of the industry that was just so in need of disruption, because every side was kind of unhappy, right? It's like hiring managers weren't getting the quality of candidates that they wanted. Recruiters were overwhelmed because there were so many job recs that they had to fill. Candidates were disappointed because they felt like they were just like a cog in the wheel. And so there's this really challenging ecosystem, and now AI is getting involved. Tell me I guess start to set the stage for, I just kind of gave my diatribe of like how I've seen the industry, but for somebody who's been in it, like what's the state, what's the transition that we're having seen happen, and then where do you think we're going?
Yeah. Okay. I've been a bit obsessed with this subject. So if I chew your ear off, then you need to stop me. But
okay,
it's a fascinating time. Really fascinating. I think it's a fascinating time, full stop. As we charge towards AGI, the step before that is going to be agentic search. And really, there's so many different potential outcomes and hypotheses of what that means for both sides of the equation, for the company looking to hire, for the candidate who's looking for work. What we're seeing, so I'll discuss what we're seeing right now, and then I'll discuss where I think we're about to head. So right now, tremendous amounts of efficiencies are there by utilizing AI. So looking to automate as much of the admin tasks as possible. I think that goes for everybody, throughout this podcast, or, how you're going to prepare for it, how you're going to produce it. I'd imagine AI is starting to get weaved into that. It's exactly the same from a recruiting perspective, and anything admin related. So that's a good. When it comes to searching for talent, there are a plethora of tools that are starting to crop up. You may well have seen them, and they spread far and wide. You have your lead gen tools like Apollo or Zoom Info, but then you also have your sourcing tools, things like Finder, and a number of others, things like Sourcewell. Now, what a lot of these are doing is effectively putting their hooks into LinkedIn. LinkedIn, people can try to talk about these other networks that exist, but really LinkedIn is still the holy grail. It's where the most people are. Reddit, you can look at GitHub. There are different areas to interrogate, but fundamentally it's still all about LinkedIn. And LinkedIn has a number of different components. You have the front end LinkedIn that everybody sees, which is basically a feed, more social media. Then you have the LinkedIn recruiter element, which is more of the old school area where recruiters and recruiting teams go in almost on the back end of LinkedIn to go in to search for candidates and build lists and start campaigns. Then you have LinkedIn Sales Navigator, which is primarily for business development. However, but when it comes to finding candidates, it's great because it kind of opens up the whole of LinkedIn to you on like a back end tool. Now, where this is relevant to a lot of these tools is they effectively all sit over LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and they really are a really good marketing play, essentially. But everybody's looking at the same data. There's 4 or 5 different key sort of data sources.
Interesting.
You have a Chrome extension, but they're all going to pull from the same place. It's going to be Zoom Info. It's going to be Rocket Reach, or there's just a number of different ones. But right now, it's doing good. I would say those are actually helping people. If I'm an internal team and I want to find a good candidate, then I'm able to open up everything and search. Where it's going to get interesting next is a lot of the talent acquisition platforms. So whether you're in-house and you're using like a Greenhouse or a Workable or something like that, or like another, or whether you're agency side, so using like a Bullhorn or a Lox or one of these big kind of recruiting CRMs, agentic search is coming. So back in the day, for me, when I first started, it was quite literally like a black book. It's placing contractors and it was networking and getting to know people and really having those relationships. Now, if I'm going to search for an engineer, I don't need to know how to manipulate the search criteria to find that person. So back in the day, it was almost like writing code. You would look at, the skill was looking at the job description and being able to always code that into a search to know exactly what to look for. And we need to remember the easy part of recruiting is physically finding the person. And anybody can do that. The hard part is convincing them to take the job. Now, with a lot of these platforms, you're soon going to be able to just have free text. So anybody could go in and say, find me an electrical engineer who's worked in a Series B company, who's worked on spacecraft end to end. Just that's it, prompt. That will then go off. That will then search LinkedIn Sales Navigator. It will pull you back a list. It will auto rank them. And if you want, you can press a button and it will actually do all of the outreach to them. So what used to take a week will now take seconds. So sounds great, doesn't it? It sounds like, fantastic for the industry. And I think it will be for a bit, but what's going to happen is untold levels of spam are going to be going to candidates. Yeah. And nobody's thought this through yet. Everyone's getting excited. But
that's the history of the internet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's about to happen in the recruiting space. And I think it's going to create a complete mess. Because you have to think, most of these companies are the same person. Finding that person, a lot of it is down to the skill of the recruiter or the quality of the network of those businesses. Who do they know? Or who do those people know? Or how does the recruiter know how to manipulate the search and get in front of a really good person? Now everyone's going to be able to get in front of them. So it's going to be a race to the bottom in terms of cost. Now, that is a problem. And I think the solution is going to be how neatly defined you are in a vertical. Like you will want to go to somebody who's an expert in a certain area and say, I don't want spam. I don't want to be spammed. I just want you to provide results for me. But the issue is the candidates, if you do those methods, are going to be getting like 50 to 100 messages a day. Like how will they even know where to start? So I think there's a solution out there somewhere. I'm not sure what it looks like yet, but a safe haven, like a place for people to go to digest content that's relevant to the sector that they want to work in. And that's when they will find their job. And I think that's the things that we're about to go through in the next 3 years. And I think it's going to be transformative.
Awesome. This is so great. I think it's really interesting. I want to back up a little bit to a couple of the points you've brought up so far before we start thinking about the future. One, when you were talking about this, just like we talk about plain language coding, this is plain language recruiting. It sounds very similar to what we're hearing in a lot of industries is that AI is kind of carving out entry level roles. It's what I'm hearing you say is like that I can imagine tools where you're empowering the hiring manager themselves a lot more in the early stages of the recruiting process. And so then so then it's more them going to the recruiter saying, hey, here's 20 candidates that I'd like you to deep dive a little bit more on and then start doing outreach to but they're kind of the first pass even more than they are today. Is that how you see it kind of happening right now and in the near future?
Yeah. So if you want to zero in on hiring managers, the issue has never been finding the right candidate on
Okay.
paper or on LinkedIn. That's not hard.
Okay.
You know,
Okay. Okay. Okay.
you know, you can still search for that and you can play around with it, and it's going to get a lot easier because of
Mm-hmm.
agentic search. Um, the difficulty has always been convincing that person that perhaps this is
Yeah.
the right opportunity and then creating the right amount of pressure. Now, if too many people start to do this agentic search and we start to spam in the way that I think we will, then the actual getting hold of them and trying to convince them is actually going to get a lot harder.
Yeah.
So I think for hiring managers at the moment, I think there's a short window where it's going to be great because it's going to be like, wow, I can actually get all of these people and I can automate the outreach. And then effectively, I've then got candidates that are going to come back to me. So next 12 months, I think there's going to be a boom. I think hiring's going to get easier. I think it's going to get faster. And it's going to be great for the space industry, record investment, all that. Initially, fantastic. I think after that is when the
Okay.
problems, they will really start to arise. So for hiring managers, I think they can be more precise with their team on what they actually want to hire. I think they could probably talk to an LLM and it will unpick their mind and what they're really looking for and help them with the
Yeah.
job description and help them with the search and get everyone sort of back on the same page. But yeah, like I say, I think this spam thing is going to happen. I mean, I don't see a world where that doesn't.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I mean, I think that's strangely enough, I think the direction we're going, like with all social media, is that you're gonna just tune almost everything out because there's just gonna be so much noise. Since you said the hardest thing is convincing people to join you, I do want to bring up one other tool that you didn't mention that I know is currently being used in recruiting that I hear people talking about is that they're going in for their, phone screen interview or first round interview, and it's with a AI. And everything that I've been hearing so far is that that's like a dramatic turnoff in terms of that convincing people to work for you part of the problem. You didn't mention it, so I'm guessing you're not using that. I don't know. Like, what do you think of the
Uh,
state of those tools, and are they going to play in this space in the future?
okay, so let's separate it out. So on the one hand, we have a new CEO of a company. Um, they want a constellation in Leo and they want to image down to 2 centimeters. That, let's take as an example, super
Okay.
focused, been there, they've done it. They're like a laser. They are the sort of company that are going to come to a company like us or anybody else, say, I have a problem, trust you, I want you to go and fix it for me. I want you to find me these people. For that, depending on how niche it is, it's difficult enough anyway. What you should not do is put unnecessary steps in the way. If I'm an executive, I'm not going to interview with an AI. It's just not going to happen. And I think a lot of it is a demographic thing.
Yep.
But so it's just not right. It just won't work. On the flip side of that, let's say that company is a bit further down the line and they say, actually, we have some iterations that we want to do to our website. We're looking for a front end dev. We would love somebody to be local, but we're not really too fussed on the skill set. Now, they have an area where there's going to be a plethora of candidates that are going to apply really, really, really quickly. That's an area where you might want to integrate AI because it's great at doing the first sift of people. It's tech savvy people that are applying. Perhaps the people are more kind of introverted. So therefore, actually, it's more comfortable to talk to an AI. It's more comfortable to have more of a chat. So I think it's absolutely nuanced, but as a one size fits all, I think on some of the vacancies that I've been talking about, you're going to lose more candidates than you're going to gain.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, a really interesting outcome that might come from all of this is that what happens if the whole thing gets flipped on its head. And if I'm a candidate looking for work, I have an AI agent who I train on me. It understands me, it gets my sense of humor, it gets everything about me. And I basically flip that AI agent out to go find me a job. So then the AI agent is working on behalf of the candidates to go and secure them interviews in companies. So if I'm a client, I actually get a knock on my emails, I guess, from
Yeah.
an AI saying, hey, look, I'm representing this candidate. They're great. Here's their portfolio. Here's their skills. It's beautifully presented because it's AI. That's a legitimate outcome that might come from all of this.
Interesting.
And that's why I think it's so nuanced. I think the executive level is not going to change because you want to talk to somebody who knows what they're talking about. It's a critical strategic hire. You as well, are you going to be in trouble if you're an executive and you fire up an AI to go find you another executive and it doesn't work? Well, you're going to be in trouble there. You want to go to a reputable executive search person who knows what they're talking about. However, there are certain roles that you can see now that start to be way more applicable. We actually set up a product now and working with a company where we're just advertising all of the roles for them at a super low price. All the roles will be out in our network. And then the candidates come in and they get auto ranked based upon how they fit the job description, but also everything that we've learned over the last 7 years about working in a startup. So they have two scores, startup suitability and the company making placements off of that. There is a place, and these roles are niche. So there is a place where there's just no contact. It's just advert out, comes in, auto ranked, speak to the candidate, hire. So I think, and that's already basic technology really, but
Yeah.
I think it's going to be very, very, very interesting to see how those different layers really pan out.
So for where we're at, there's a couple interesting things that I think you're bringing up. Of one, you could see a world where some of this agentic AIs really enable candidates, and that now all of a sudden you have kind of a recruiter acting on your behalf where you never could before. There's a bit of empowerment of hiring managers because they can get out there and search a little bit better, though it's not incredibly impactful, maybe simply because it's not that difficult even today. And then the final piece that you brought up is this just kind of spam nature of what's going to happen. Like, do you see a pathway out of that?
Yeah. I think what I was trying to say in other words, and I think this is applicable to lots of different areas, is that there is the potential that AI kind of eats itself. Meaning, if I'm a hiring manager and I suddenly spin up full automated outreach for my electrical engineering job, great, I'll get in front of more candidates. But if everybody does that, then the level of spam will mean that nobody gets hold of anybody, and therefore it is kind of eating itself. So that's the problem that will need to be solved. I do think the way out of it is, it's something that we're really looking at is this potential flip on the head. Does it make sense to give the candidates the power? If somebody's not happy, then is there a smart way to equip candidates with the right level of knowledge to be able to really excel in their next career move, and a place to come to consume content to not be spammed, and therefore by proxy put the power back in the candidates? Like, you go for a job when you're ready on something that really fits you, versus at the moment it's a kind of a case of, well, client demand, we go out and we headhunt. And like I said, executive headhunt area I think is safe. I think the placement of contractors is safe, because if you need a contractor and you're in a company, you need somebody quickly. But I think everything else I think that there's definitely a lot of areas that could be disrupted. But I do think your electrical engineering, your electrical power systems, like I said, initially it's going to be great to hire managers. but then they're going to kind of cause themselves a problem, and it's going to revert back to actually who actually can like who can text the good electrical engineers right now, and then
Yeah.
for me. So I think it's going to
Yeah.
circle, and I'm sure you're more than aware of this as well. The problem with what's coming is that everybody's going to really crave face-to-face interaction,
Yes.
and therefore really well up on events in kind of closed networks. Meaningful interactions are going to become more and more important, and therefore this whole notion of speaking to an AI to get a job, I think it's going to go full circle, and people are like, no, I just want to go and talk to somebody about it. It's a career move. For me, it's very important, and that's why I think a lot of the big staffing and recruitment agencies might find themselves in a bit of trouble because they cover lots of different sectors, and it's going to be about the niche, develop that niche, meet people in person, and create that level of experience. I think that is the way out of it. Nobody's done it yet. I think it's going to be, we're going to have to feel it out, just like we're all going to have to feel out everything in the next few years with what's about to come, especially with AGI. But the staffing sector is primed, along with lots of different services industries, to be completely disrupted.
Yeah. It's kind of an old is new again kind of feel of the traditional who's in your network, what's your brand, all that kind of stuff just elevates in importance again, because I like that idea of like, or that kind of metaphor of AI eating itself. It really reminds me of, one of my favorite, and I think one of the most prescient AI movies is the movie Her, where at the end, the AIs just leave. They're just like, actually, we've decided it's not even worth it anymore. We're out.
Yeah.
And I almost think that's like the most likely outcome for a lot of this stuff. Maybe not quite like that, because I don't even know what happened to them. But to your point, it's going to get so good that there's no competitive edge left within the space, and so you have to go to more traditional things. That's interesting.
Yeah. The best example that I can see at the moment is Reddit. I think not only is their share price well because it's a terrific platform, but when you think about what they've actually created, they're both a generalist and a specialist at the same time, and that's a real art. And I think the way that they've done that is the future of social media, the future of interactions, the future of engagements. It's going to be about finding a tribe, and I do take a lot of inspiration from Reddit. I think what they've created is awesome, and so I think that style is probably where things are going to land. I'm very interested to see what LinkedIn are going to do about it, because it still is where all the candidates did. That's pretty much, it's mainly a job focused area. And it's going to be interesting to see what their moves are. Few years. So far, maybe some agentic search on the back end of LinkedIn to help recruiters and to help hiring managers. But they're going to have to really think about it. Otherwise they're going to lose market share.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, this has been a really interesting look into, it's always great to get an understanding of what kind of the current state of things are, hear it from you, somebody who's in the business, of what kind of tools are working well, what kind of tools aren't working well. And at least though I'm sure any candidate or somebody looking for a job isn't excited about the idea of just continuously getting spammed, it's nice because I think that you have a great hypothesis here of like what the future will end up being, or kind of all that spam, you're just like, okay, whatever. And you just turn it off and focus on and it'll force companies to refocus on personal connection, their brand, their talent brand, which I think everybody would like to see happen. So that's great. That's been amazing. Where can people, if anybody out there needs help hiring an executive, or where can they go?
Yeah, I mean, you just go to the Evona site, evona.com. Plenty of ways to sign up there, or info@evona.com from an email perspective, or just shoot me a message on LinkedIn. I think it's going to be quite a scary time for lots of people. So I'm happy to talk to anybody anytime, regardless of sector, just to help to kind of unpick it a little bit. There's definitely a lot of light at the end of the tunnel. I think we just got to try and find a way, as space companies, staffing companies and services companies, just to navigate through it together and just not let it be a problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I think it's great. But back to your previous point, email marketing, prime example, it's kind of dying. 5 years ago, I think social media marketing and messaging is that next. I think so. So, like you said, what's after that? That's kind of where the opportunity lies.
I think that's totally right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tom. I look forward to talking to you again.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot for having me. Cheers.
Thank you so much for listening to today's show. If you are looking for help turning your organization's great engineers into great managers, me and my team at Better Everyday Studios would love to help. We deliver targeted and interactive training workshops that are designed to help build the 3 fundamental skills of any new manager: building trust, giving feedback, and setting goals. Reach out to me through matt@bettereverydaystudios.com so we can start making your organization better every day.